Hi, welcome to 5 Minutes with Pastor Lutzer. I'm so glad that you joined us today because we are studying the attributes of God. And as you have frequently heard me say, every time we are in God's presence, we should be humbled, we should be encouraged, and always we should worship. Well, today we're discussing another one of the omnis, if I might put it that way. There are 3 attributes of God, and they are non-communicable. Remember, I explained that in some previous sessions. That means that you and I will never be omnipotent, we will never be omnipresent, we will never be omniscient. Those omnis belong to God alone. You know, I think it was Tony Evans who said that whatever there has to be done, God is everywhere present to do it. He has infinite knowledge, so he knows what needs to be done. And he also has omnipotence. He has the power to do it. Now, in a future segment, we're going to be discussing whether or not God's purposes are sometimes thwarted. How powerful is God? But today we're talking about the doctrine of the omnipresence of God. That is, God is everywhere present. My text is actually taken from Psalm 139, and you may know these verses. You'll notice it says in verse 7, "Where shall I go from your spirit, or where shall I flee from your presence? If I ascend into heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, that is in hell, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand will lead me, and your right hand shall uphold me." As a matter of fact, he goes on to say that if I do something in the dark, it is really light to you. Now let's back off and think for a moment about the attributes of God that we've been discussing. Always remember that God is everywhere present, totally everywhere present. In other words, all of his attributes are everywhere. It's not as if God is 90% omniscient here, but not 90% omnipresent somewhere else. All of God is everywhere. As a matter of fact, when we discuss the attributes of God, sometimes we have to remind ourselves that God's attributes are not slices, like slices in a pie. The attributes of God always work together. As a matter of fact, God doesn't do anything without the consent of his entire nature, the attributes of God. And this is why, as I study God, I find him to be more and more complex, but also more intriguing. There is no greater responsibility and privilege than us to contemplate God. Well, what about what the psalmist said? One of the truths that come to us is simply this: we can't go anywhere where God isn't. You remember it says, if I go east, north, west, heaven, hell. By the way, speaking of hell, I'm going to tell you something that is the most horrifying, sobering thought that will ever cross your mind. R.C. Sproul and some other theologians actually believe that God is in hell because, after all, he is omnipresent, and that the fire of hell is actually the fire of God, but he is there not to bless, but to condemn. How sobering is that? But for those of us who are believers, let us remember that God's presence is always with us, and that should be such a great encouragement. For example, we can't run from him. Jonah, one of the most humorous passages in the Bible, is in chapter 1 of Jonah, where it says, "And Jonah fled from the presence of the Lord." You and I can't go where God isn't. Now let's talk about you for a moment. What day is it for you? I happen to be doing this recording on a Thursday. But for you, it might be Monday. Well, I want you to know that God is ahead of you. His presence is everywhere. So he is there already at our Fridays, on our Fridays, our Saturdays, our Sundays, our Mondays. And we will never escape his care and his gaze. In him, we live and move and have our being. Today, let us worship the Almighty God because He is omnipresent. Wherever you find yourself, God is there. Thanks so much for joining us today, and I hope that you join us again next time. And today, go with God.
Thanks for joining us for 5 Minutes with Pastor Lutzer, a production of Moody Church Media. If you'd like more teaching to encourage you in your Christian walk, visit moodymedia.org or follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Moody Church Media. Join us next week as we continue to study the attributes of God together.